The oldest chapel in New Mills was built in 1766, and within 40 years was already too small to contain the devout inhabitants desirous of assembling to hear divine worship, so plans were made for a new chapel. This second chapel was built in 1810 at a cost of £2,377, 15 shillings and 11 pence, which included the sum of £10 for ale for the workmen. Seth Evans notes Riley in his History of Wesleyanism that
in those days, ale for the workmen was a great item in the accounts.
As an illustration of the financial struggles of our forefathers, 10 years later the chapel still had a debt upon it of £1,459, which seemed to increase every year, as something like £73 a year was paid as interest. The Wesleyans were pioneers of Sunday school work in the district, and the first chapel found a new use in 1844 as the Wesleyan Day and Sabbath School. At Christmas 1860, we find that there were 500 scholars on the books, with an average attendance of 360, and 75 teachers. Modern classroom standards would require a building at least 3 times as large to accommodate these numbers. The Sunday school continued to thrive into the 1950s and became a centre of social life for several generations. A stage was added, and the building also served as the church hall until it was abandoned in the 1960s and lay derelict. The next record we have is when the building was purchased in the early 1970s by a group of Christian businessmen known as the Macedonian Trust. They loaned the chapel to the founding elders of New Mills Free Church, who reopened the building for worship in November 1974. Some of the other churches in the town were mildly alarmed by the fact that the oldest of their 4 founding elders was only 28. The youthfulness and drive of these elders resulted in active outreach to the youth of the town, and a Sunday school that at its height attracted 120 children on a Sunday morning. In 1987, the church was renamed to New Mills Christian Fellowship and continued to meet at High Street until 1995, when the building was transferred to the newly established Revival Church that had previously been meeting in Marple. Revive Church, as it has become, is part of the worldwide Assemblies of God group of churches, and since that time has grown steadily, mirroring the growth experienced in the very early days of the chapel, when it became too small for its intended purpose. The building that was provided by sacrificial giving of devout believers 250 years ago continues to serve the purpose laid down by the first trustees
for the exercise of holy and religious worship, and to preach and expound God's holy word.